Most gardeners think mulch is mulch. If it covers soil and blocks weeds, they assume it's doing the job. That mistake quietly costs people yields, soil life, and months of growth every single season. Let's start with the biggest misconception people carry into this discussion. Cardboard is often recommended as the stronger mulch because it's thicker, lasts longer, and smothers weeds better. And yes, it does smother weeds aggressively. The problem is that it also smothers soil. In real gardens, especially raised beds and high-intensity food plots, that matters more than most people realize. When I first tested cardboard years ago, I used it the way everyone recommends. Brown, uncoated boxes, tape removed, overlapped heavily, soaked before covering. In the short term, it worked. Weeds disappeared. The bed looked clean. But within 6 to 8 weeks, I started seeing symptoms that didn't line up with my inputs. Leafy greens slowed down, corn lost colour. Tomatoes looked healthy above ground but had shallow, lazy roots when I pulled one mid-season to check. The issue wasn't nutrients in the soil, it was gas exchange and moisture dynamics. Cardboard forms a semi-impermeable layer that dramatically reduces oxygen flow into the soil. In compacted ground, that's already a problem. In raised beds with rich compost, it becomes a serious bottleneck. Soil biology needs oxygen. Roots need oxygen. When you slow that exchange, microbial activity shifts toward anaerobic processes, and that's where nutrient availability starts to go sideways. Newsprint behaves completely differently, even though most people lump it into the same category. When I say newsprint, I'm talking about plain black and white newspaper, not glossy inserts, not coloured advertising pages. The old school stuff that tears easily and breaks down fast. Thickness matters here. I typically use 4 to 6 full sheets layered together, which ends up around 1 millimeter thick once wet and settled. That's enough to block light, but thin enough to breathe. In a backyard garden bed, the difference shows up fast. With newsprint, soil stays evenly moist instead of water pooling above a barrier. Earthworms move freely through it. You can peel it back mid-season and still smell healthy. Aerobic soil underneath. With cardboard, especially double-layered, you often find a sour smell or dry, compacted soil beneath, depending on rainfall patterns. People often argue that cardboard is better because it lasts longer. That's exactly the problem. In productive gardens, you don't want mulch that behaves like a semi-permanent mat. You want something that protects soil while actively feeding it. Newsprint breaks down in about 6 to 10 weeks depending on temperature and moisture, which aligns beautifully with peak microbial activity during the growing season. There's also the nitrogen conversation, and this is where cardboard really loses ground. Both materials are carbon-heavy, but cardboard has a much higher carbon-to-nitrogen ratio and a denser structure. When soil microbes start breaking it down, they pull nitrogen aggressively from the surrounding soil. In beds where people don't compensate, this shows up as pale leaves and stalled growth, especially in heavy feeders like brassicas and corn. With newsprint, the nitrogen drawdown is milder and shorter-lived. I've measured this indirectly by running identical beds side by side, one mulched with cardboard and one with newsprint, both receiving the same compost and fertilizer inputs. The cardboard bed consistently needed supplemental nitrogen within 3 weeks. That last part is important. Neither material should ever be laid directly on bare soil if your goal is production. I always apply at least 2 to 3 centimeters of finished compost first. That layer acts as both a nutrient buffer and a biological engine. Then the paper goes on top, soaked thoroughly, and finally a thin organic top mulch like straw, chopped leaves or grass clippings to hold everything in place. In raised beds, this system shines. The beds stay weed-free, soil temperature stays stable, and roots penetrate deeply. When the newsprint breaks down, it doesn't leave behind stubborn fragments that interfere with planting the next crop. You can transplant straight through it without fighting layers. Hydroponics might sound like an odd place to bring this up, but I've tested both materials in hybrid systems where net pots sit in media-filled troughs exposed to light. Algae control is critical in those setups. Cardboard blocks light well, but it also traps moisture and creates mold issues around edges. Newsprint, when layered thin and replaced regularly, blocks enough light to control algae while still allowing evaporation and airflow. Another overlooked issue is water infiltration. In real rainfall or heavy irrigation, cardboard sheds water once it dries and stiffens. You'll see water running off beds instead of soaking in, especially on slopes or compacted ground. Newsprint rehydrates instantly. Now let's talk weeds honestly. Cardboard absolutely wins in raw weed suppression, especially against perennial weeds with established root systems. If you're reclaiming a neglected area full of couch grass or bindweed, cardboard has a place. But once a bed is in production, weed pressure changes. You're mostly dealing with annuals germinating from surface seed. Newsprint blocks enough light to stop those while allowing you to intervene easily if something pushes through. There's also the contamination question. People assume cardboard is safer because it's brown and natural. In reality, cardboard often contains adhesives, sizing agents, and recycled fibers from unknown sources. Newsprint inks, at least modern black inks, are soy-based and break down cleanly. I'm far more comfortable putting newsprint into beds where I grow food intensively. After years of testing, my conclusion is blunt. Cardboard is a blunt instrument. Newsprint is a precision tool. One is good for suppression and reset. The other is better for growth, biology, and season-long productivity. If you're running a small backyard garden and want healthier soil without constant inputs, use newsprint layered over compost and topped lightly. If you're managing raised beds and care about root depth, moisture balance, and microbial life, newsprint wins without question. If you're experimenting with hybrid hydroponic systems and need light control without suffocating airflow, newsprint is the only one I'd consider. Cardboard still has a role, but it's a limited one. Use it deliberately, not habitually. The mistake most gardeners make is defaulting to the strongest option instead of the most appropriate one. If this kind of grounded, experience-driven breakdown helps you grow better food, subscribe to the channel. And if you know another gardener who's layering cardboard everywhere and wondering why their beds feel lifeless, share this video with them. Better food starts with better soil, and better soil starts with understanding what we're really putting on top of it.